Next, we have Chloé Messdaghi, who is an ethical hacker advocate, a very common keynote speaker, very recently founded the Hacker Book Club that meets on Tuesday nights covering books. She also has a podcast with Alyssa Miller called The Uncommon Journey, which is about information security professionals. She also is very active in the volunteer community for pro bono, etc. Please welcome Chloé Messdaghi.
Oh, hello, everyone. Welcome to my crib. It's a wall. I live in a white space everywhere. Anyway, thanks, Ray, for the wonderful introduction. That was awesome. And having you as my intro person, man, you're starting this off real smooth. That's all I'm going to say. Wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Chloé Messdaghi. I'm going to have my camera on right now, but I promise at the end I'll put my camera back on. And yes, maybe Sherlock will make a special guest appearance. And if you don't know who Sherlock is, it is my little Shiba Inu. And yes, she's a little bit about 2 years old and amazing. So let's jump into what I'm supposed to talk about and not my dog. Okay. I'm going to share my screen right now. 1 second. All right, and here we go. Can everyone see my screen? I will take that as a yes, hopefully. Okay.
Sorry, 1 second, I have to add your screen. I have to add your screen. Hold on. Here we go. There we go. All right.
Okay. All right, camera going off now. Getting serious time. Rolling up invisible sleeves. Okay, here we go. All right. Hi, everyone. So we're going to talk about hacker rights today. I'm very excited to do this with you. So, who am I? I am the VP of Strategy over at Point3 Security. And when I'm not that, I'm an ethical hacker advocate. I'm meaning that I'm trying to fight for rights for all of us, but also to try to bring rights to those that are underrepresented in the field. Other than that, I am the president and co-founder of WomenHackerz, WoSEC, and also the founder of WomenHackerz. And when I'm not doing that, I'm just a parent to Sherlock, and also you probably heard of the Hacker Book Club. And as Ray said a little bit earlier, I also run a podcast with ITSP Magazine alongside Alyssa Miller and Phil Wiley on The Uncommon Journey. So let's dive into the depths now. So this is a little picture of Sherlock. I know she's adorable, and she was about 4 months old in that photo. We're going to dive a little bit on the background of what's going on right now. Also, why influencing the public. I'll talk a little bit about the brain, because I'm obsessed with the brain. And we're going to go into the role that the media plays, the role organizations play, and the role legislation plays, and what are the next steps that we can all do. So, what is the hacker? Usually we get this image, right? You know, that person with the dark hoodie in the basement basically has like some sort of, I don't know, I want to say a superpower that they can see in the dark. And sometimes we get this person, you know, because one cannot cover their camera on their computer, so must wear a ski mask. And if you've worn a ski mask before, it's super itchy. It's not comfortable when you're looking for something. But in reality, hackers come in all shapes and size. And hackers do wear different shades. And I mean, most of you guys are aware of this, of course, but in case you don't, overall, hackers usually wear about 3 main type of hats. Usually you have a black hat, a gray hat, and a white hat. But when I'm usually saying hacker, I'm referring to the white hats, you know, the ethical hackers. In general, black hats commit malicious acts and are considered criminals, and we probably should start calling them cyber criminals, not hackers. Gray hats, well, there's too many shades to cover, but in general, there are people who are passionate about technology, finding vulns, fixing vulns, and as such is what made them want to be a hacker. And they just didn't know ethical hacking existed sometimes. But most of the time, when they do discover that ethical hacking does exist, sometimes their hats do change from a shade of a gray to a white if they were previously a black hat. So what are ethical hackers? Basically, they are the hackers who work to keep data safe from attackers by finding system vulnerabilities that can be mitigated. White hats are usually employed by a target systems owner and are typically paid, sometimes quite well, or sometimes they just get thank yous, let's be real, but their work is not illegal because it's done with the system owner's consent. But even though if you see on this page, I know it's a little bit hard to make out, but on the left side is if you type into Google criminal hackers, and then on the right side you see ethical hackers on the other side, you kind of see the exact same images. And this is a bad thing for us. And it's not just the pictures themselves, but it's also the language that's being used in the media. And by the media, I mean marketing and press. And how does this imagery probably impact us? Well, knowing me, I'm going to dive into your brain now. So how does imagery impact us? Well, let's just say that you've read online, your family, your friends have read things about hackers. And usually they see those images of someone in a dark hoodie, maybe with a ski mask on top of it, and just using the term hacker all the time for a criminal activity. Now, this now turns into a socially constructed belief, something that you basically were told by, someone who you look up to, or someone that you know is well respected. So this could be the press, this can be a teacher, this could be a parent, or anything like that at any age. But usually it's something found in the media, we've noticed. So what that does is that internalize putting people in categories of like us, who's not like us. So now what happens is that when we think of criminal, we don't associate ourselves as criminals, most of us, hopefully. And because of that, we have now programmed that anyone who looks like a criminal is someone that's not safe. And by not being safe, meaning you go in a survival mode. And this is found in the unconscious part of the amygdala, which is the almond-shaped space that you see in this image that's lit up in a small little circle. The amygdala is in there, and within it is outside of it is the temporal lobe. So the amygdala is our survival mechanism. It's also known as the fight versus flight. And this is really important to know because it's unconscious. It's stuff that has been stored in your temporal lobe, which stores your memory, that you now are applying it as a fear tactic. But the good news is that it has to check in the prefrontal cortex of your brain. So when the amygdala is sending a warning distress signal to the prefrontal cortex, it's basically checking in to say, do I act on this? Does my body act on this? Do I do some sort of action? And the prefrontal cortex kind of acts like the CEO of your brain. It basically tells it to act or to calm down. And so it is a very consciously aware process. And that's the thing we all need to understand, is that this is the time when you can question stereotypes and beliefs. So anything that's socially constructed that is ingrained in your brain can be questioned. And this is the most important thing to note, because if someone tells you a story about someone who is an ethical hacker, who's doing incredible work, that's protecting everyone every single day by finding a vulnerability, that changes that message. That changes everything. So those that were fearing people that were hackers or are hackers, it changes that for them. So just know that this is something very important for us to know. If we want to change the way people look at the hacker community, we need to share our stories. We need people to understand there's a difference between a cyber criminal and an ethical hacker. And to note that it is a challenging road to do so, but you yourself are able to question your biases. And yes, it's very hard to do that because it makes us feel very uncomfortable when we're looking at ourselves that we are wrong, especially if something's very much ingrained in everywhere you see. I mean, many of us that have attended Black Hat or RSA, we look at the sales floor and we see all these images of hackers as someone who's terrible. And that's not what we want our image to be. There's a huge difference between the two, and we need to change that. So the reason why we have this fear and what this is doing, because we're not changing public awareness enough, is that 93% of the Forbes Global 2000s still don't have a vulnerability disclosure program or a policy. And 60% of hackers today do not report vulnerabilities. And this is research that I've seen through Amit El-Zari's work. And the laws that we have all around the world are preventing good hacking and prosecuting ethical hackers. And what's also happening is that we're seeing an increase in number of malicious hackers. And you're probably wondering, wait, what? Let me explain. Sometimes people come into the field as an ethical hacker, or say they're more like gray hats. And what ends up happening is they submit a vulnerability and then they have to go through some sort of prosecution, even though if it was within scope. The amount of basically having a high anxiety and also insomnia that's associated with that, I could be prosecuted for doing something good. It usually asks then the question, which is, then why am I still doing this? And why am I not a black hat where I could get paid more if I'm just going to have the exact same fears? And this is something that I've seen when interviewing and researching black hat and gray hats. So this is why it's really important that we start acting on this way. And let me tell you a little bit about legislation. Now, laws are very important for us to have anything changed. And the thing to note about this is that all around the world, we see these three things, which is there's anti-hacking laws, which in the US we call it the CFAA, and then we have the anti-circumvention laws. In Canada, it's called the Copyright Act. In the US, it's called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Then we have acceptable use policy. Now, what does an anti-hacking law? This is basically used when someone accesses a computer without authorization or an excess of authorization. And this is usually used when a researcher goes out of scope. It is the act used to prosecute hacking. And a random fact, but CFAA, the reason it came about was Ronald Reagan saw war games and freaked out and decided we need to do something about this and prevent stuff like this from happening. And then he created an act. And as we know, overall, creating anything out of fear base is never going to be a balanced item. So let's go to anti-circumvention laws, the Copyright Act. So what are copyright acts? It's basically the right to repair, that reverse engineering is seen as a breach of property. Acceptable use policy, well, let's just put it this way. I know I want to ask the question, but let's just pretend we're all in a room together. How many of you guys in the room have ever read your terms and condition if you have an Apple product? Yeah, I tried, I got bored, I decided to watch a movie instead. But in general, they can be very long, too much verbiage. It can confuse anyone, especially if English is not your first language, and especially because none of us are pretty much attorneys. And this can lead to some serious miscommunication and issues for ethical hackers that don't really speak English. Clearly, these laws are very old and out of date, and honestly, were created out of fear, not empathy. By taking the time to understand what is needed, why laws should only prosecute malicious acts, such as criminals, and not good hackers. And with improvements of legislation, what we can see is a huge change overall. With improvements in legislation, we can have all the Forbes Global 2000 have a vulnerability disclosure policy. We can have 100% of hackers can report vulnerabilities without having to worry about being prosecuted. And having laws that encourage good hacking while prosecuting those that are cyber criminals, that's what we need and that's what we deserve. And it's been since 1984 since we've been dealing with this. And it's not just that, but it's just overall, think about it. If we start having all these laws that help people that want to be ethical hackers, then maybe we might have less cyber criminals in the end. And by cyber criminals that I'm talking to are the ones that ask the question, do I feel guilty? If you feel guilt, it will keep you up at night. And that's the thing to always remember. If you feel guilty at all, if you have a conscience, I want to work with you. So influence the public cycle. So we've already dived into the brain. So you know that the amygdala, you know that we have this situation now, you know the landscape. But to be able to influence the public cycle, we need to make sure we have the media, organization, and legislation involved. Because all in all, they actually work with each other. We need to push the press to be more aware of the words that they use. We need them to change the language and imagery of what is a hacker and start having them use the term cyber criminals to those who commit unethical hacking. Overall, we really need to separate the two. And when it comes to organization, we need to have the public opinion and for them to step up with the media by when they talk to the media to let them know that they need to change the way that they stand and that this is incorrect language, incorrect imagery, but also because organizations are usually the pushers to get new legislation in. And we need to motivate Capitol Hill in the US to get on board and to update our current legislation that will protect the community. And overall, we need all three of them to be able to support hacker rights to become a reality. So the 5 needs. Overall, we need to change our language and imagery in InfoSec. We need to work with the media. We need society to notice the everyday heroes. We need organizations to have a vulnerability disclosure program. And we definitely need representatives to update today's legislation. And the first step together that I'm asking for everyone here right now is to help me by signing this petition. This petition was created in the very last week of February, and it breaks it down from what I have shown you. It talks about organizations and asking for them to implement policies that clearly define scope, what kind, if any, rewards, contact information, communicate updates on submission, and the extension of a bilateral trust to include non-retribution. This is very important because I don't know about you, but there's times when you want to submit a vulnerability. It takes hours to find the contact information. Not just that, sometimes it actually takes days. And then you get to a point where it's like, do I even want to take this risk? And then we break into politicians. We want to have politicians get to know us. Instead of seeing us as a cyber criminal, the things that they're seeing and portraying in the media, we need them to see and understand us. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is by hearing our stories. And for us and to get our family and friends to push to support us too as well. And then we ask for the media, of course, to stop portraying ethical hackers as malicious actors, change the imagery. And when reporting on malicious act of hacking, please refer them as cyber criminals and not hackers. And then, of course, I had to add something about the hacker community. And I want to please state this over and over. Please stay within scope and please don't exploit, because when you do that, you break a trust with everyone in the end. And there is a couple of other details at the bottom. Check out disclose.io to see what are some programs that are trying to do as much as possible by coming up with things that can actually have protection for you. And then last but not least, I also put a line in there, the black hoodie and the cutout ski mask, because it's starting to irritate me. I don't know about you guys, but it definitely irritates me now. So the main takeaways: ethical hackers deserve protection and rights. We do. And the current imagery and language has been misleading the public and is still making them fear us. And we need to change that fear-based thinking. We need them to have their prefrontal cortex to be able to question their amygdala subconscious thoughts. And we need to work together to change the public's perception by updating legislation, media, and organizations. But most importantly, also sign and share the petition, because when I get 1,000 signatures, I could then go and take it to government. I could then take it to organizations. I could do a lot of work, but I need to get at least 1,000 signatures. Most importantly, you can always share this talk. But I really do want to say that the change really starts with you and me. So after this talk, if you can, look at what you're doing that can help the community out by looking at what you can do at this very moment to try to change the situation, because it's going to take all of us to push for a change. And it's going to take people besides us. That means we need to even go outside of InfoSec to bring about that. I wanted to list some resources for you. So the ITSP Magazine podcast is on there. This is the link. You can take a photo, take a screenshot, do whatever you want. The Hacker Book Club, we meet every Tuesday at 5 p.m. So feel free to join us. Right now we're covering Tribe of Hackers, and our next meeting will have Jake Williams on it, also known as Malware Jake. We have Ian Coldwater. Oh my God, who else do we have? We have Whitney Champion, Short Stacks, and then on top of my head, we have David Kennedy. Also, the ethical hacker rights petition is on here as well, the link. I also have on my Twitter feed, it's the pinned tweet at the top. And then there is a program that I'm doing with Mental Health Hackers, which is providing a forum for people to volunteer to basically be connected with other people that are feeling like they want to talk to someone or make a new friend. So think of a pen pal during this time, but a virtual pen pal, because there's a lot of people that are feeling isolated and alone and could really use a friend. I also wanted to list some other COVID-19 basically resources for you. There's a crisis text line that you can use. Please use this if you ever feel like you need to. If you're having any really, really down moments, please do not hesitate to contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. It's really important. The 24-hour domestic violence hotline, if you know anyone, honestly, people need to know about this. And there's a disaster distress helpline as well. If you can, if anything, take away from this talk, you may have ignored everything that I just talked about. But those last 4 right there, if you can, take a photo of that, share it with your family, your friends, everyone you know. That's going to be the most beneficial thing that you could do from this talk. Because at the end of the day, if you don't want to believe in the petition, it's okay. If you don't want to believe in ethical rights, that's okay. But right now, we're in COVID-19, and those 4 things can actually save someone's life. So please share that around. And last but not least, I want to just say thank you guys for existing. Feel free to follow me on Chloé Messdaghi on Twitter. But I always say thank you for existing because I want you to know that I'm just so happy and thankful every single day that I'm part of this community. And so thank you guys for helping me in any sort of way, for helping me get to where I am. And honestly, if you need anything, my DMs are always open. And just note that there's always going to be someone there to listen and to be there and to support you in this community. And that's what makes it so beautiful. And also I want to say thank you to everyone at all the talks. You guys are doing a fabulous job. I can't believe you're doing this for 24 hours. Congratulations. This is so awesome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to bring Sherlock over on my lap, and I'm going to answer any questions that you guys may have. All right.
So Chloé, we're going to start with mine because I get to be in charge of this until the break.
Okay.
First and foremost, the laws look a little creaky. They look a little old, a little long in the tooth, if you will, right? And I've noticed that there's been a lot of news around cybersecurity in the last few weeks, right? Since the post-pandemic world, the news media is really harping on people that are taking advantage of it for ransomware or for scams. Are we in danger of any rushed legislation being kind of crammed through to address some of those?
So I've talked to a few politicians about this, and this is a concern that they have. The other concern that they also have is people are dropping 0 days like never before, and which is great for us because we're like, hey, you need to know about this. You got to take security seriously. And I'm hoping that pushes those Forbes 2000 companies to be like, you know what, maybe we should look into a VDP program. But overall, we have to be I think overall takeaway on this one is start doing activities. If us, the hacker community, can do anything to help outside InfoSec and within InfoSec for anyone around the world to be able to see that we're there, we're supporting, and we're good people, and we're just trying to help, I think that changes the narrative of what people are thinking of what we are like.
Do you think there's any major lessons that we could learn from the fact that most of our parents and cousins and brother-in-laws all started using Zoom last week, right when the Zoom vulnerabilities were coming out?
It's great because now you're having that conversation like, did you update your Zoom? And sure. It's funny because you'll always have like the parents or the family members like, oh, I'm like, when was the last time you updated your phone? And they're like, update? What?
My what?
Oh, or they're like, oh yeah, oh, those updates, oh. Yeah, I always forget about those. But now they're like, oh, Zoom, that, and I use that every day. I actually am going to start paying attention to it. So, yeah.
Now, we are getting quite a few questions for Sherlock, but I don't have any means of asking Sherlock the questions, so I'm just going to ignore those. There is a question from the Slido. Could something like CEH authorize, that's a certified ethical hacker, the program,
Yeah.
Could that authorize a hacker? Could it protect the hacker from prosecution?
I'm not an attorney myself, but just note that it's always challenging because it depends on the organization. It depends on their legal team. We have actually seen people that have stayed within scope getting prosecuted. So even if you are an ethical hacker, you have a certification of it, or you're part of an organization of it and is well recognized or whatnot, you're still in danger. So just always keep that in mind. I always tell people, if someone has like a bug bounty public program or a VDP program or a list on disclose.io, I feel like that's a little bit safer for you usually to report something. If not, I feel like ask around and see what people say when you're reporting any vulnerability. Honestly, stay safe, in other words.
And we did also have quite a few people asking about the petition on change.org. That is linked now in the All the Talks Slack, so you can get to it there. We also have a screenshot of some of the resources that you mentioned around COVID-19. Chloé, we really, really appreciate that insight, that talk, and especially all of the wonderful things you do for the community with regards to the ITSP podcast and the mental health hackers. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. And we really do appreciate Sherlock making a cameo appearance here as well. So thank you very much. And I know everybody is joining me and giving you a virtual round of applause too. As well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm online always.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chloé.
All right.
And folks, we're just